Juan Pablo, Brian, and Luis, if you agree, we can start.
Yes. Let's wait 1 minute until it's 3 p.m. here in Houston, and then we're going to start.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Okay, so it's 3 p.m. now here in Houston, so we're going to start. Welcome, everyone. We have a really special event for today. It is part of the Offshore Lecture Series, which is a special event that we have organized with the AAPG Young Professionals Argentina, Brazil, and Colombia chapters. So again, welcome, everyone. I'm going to start, before we start our event, I'm going to just show some slides of some of the events that the AAPG Latin America region is organizing for the coming months and for the next year. And then we're going to move ahead with our event for today. So first, we want to invite everyone to register for this short course that is application of oil and gas industry skills to subsurface carbon storage and the carbon trading economy. It is going to be a virtual event, the 23 of this month. It is going to be related to all the technical and business overview of carbon capture storage for technical professionals, government representatives, and media. Here in this link, you will have all the information related to the course content, the pricing for all the people who are interested. So again, we invite everyone to register to this short course. Additionally, we also want to invite everyone to register to the virtual technical symposium, Hydrogen 2022. It's going to be also a virtual event, the 1st and 2nd of December of this year. It is the first event dedicated to Latin American Caribbean region hydrogen potential organized by the AAPG. It is going to be a 2-day technical symposium with presentations, panels, and interactive Q&A sessions exploring the role of hydrogen in the renewable energy economy. So again, here in this link, you will find all the information in order to register. Also, we want to invite everyone to the AAPG South Atlantic Conjugate Margins Virtual Technical Symposium. We have right now opened the call for abstracts. It is going to be a virtual event. It is going to be from the 6th to the 8th of December of this year. It is the first event organized in partnership with the AAPG Africa region. It is going to be a 3.5-day sessions with technical presentations and operator panels highlighting geology, hydrocarbon potential, and investment opportunities in the South Atlantic margins of South America and Africa. So we invite everyone to this really special event and to register. And if you want to send your abstracts, it is still open. And also we want to save the date for next year. On February 8th and 9th, we're going to have this event organized by the AAPG Latin American Caribbean region and the ACGGP, which is going to be the Geosciences Technology Workshop Caribbean 2023 related to recent discoveries and exploration opportunities in offshore Caribbean basins. It is going to be held in Barranquilla, Colombia. It's going to be a 2-day in-person event with technical presentations, panels, exhibitions, Q&A sessions. And soon we're gonna open the call for abstracts for this event too. So just save the date. This is gonna be related to the session that we're gonna have today. Additionally, for next year too, on May of 2023, we're gonna have the AAPG and APGP Geoscience Technology Workshop Brazil 2023 related to the role of new technologies in maximizing onshore and offshore plays. It is gonna be held in Rio de Janeiro. And finally, in Paramaribo next year in November, we're going to have this special event of the AAPG and SP Technology Workshop Guyana Suriname 2023 related to the recent activity and exploration opportunities in the Guyana Suriname Basin. With that, we're going to move ahead to the event we have prepared for today. It is called Colombia Offshore Exploration History, Recent Discoveries, and Untapped Potential. We have two special speakers for today, Brian Frost and Luis Carlos Carvajal. The agenda that we're going to follow today is we're going to have a 20-minute presentation by Brian. then a 20-minute presentation by Luis Carlos, and then we're going to have a 15 Q&A session for all the people to ask questions about both presentations. I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. So we're going to start with Brian. Brian is a geophysical engineer from the Colorado School of Mines. He has more than 20 years of experience in the oil and gas industry. He's currently retired and was previously a distinguished geophysical advisor at Anadarko Petroleum Corporation, where he was responsible for worldwide new ventures and frontier exploration. His previous experience includes many companies like Phillips Petroleum, like Conoco, British Borneo, and Anadarko, where he had the opportunity to work in different sedimentary basins and countries around the world, like Indonesia, Somalia, Trinidad, Atlantic margins, West and East Africa, Peru, and also Colombia, which is the subject we are going to cover today. Brian is also an active member of the Houston Geological Society, the AAPG, the Geological Society of London, among others. Luis Carlos Carvajal is an exploration geoscientist at Multi Energy, where he is responsible for structural characterization of petroleum systems using different data types at multiple scales. He's a geologist from the National University of Colombia, and he's doctor in petroleum geology from the University of Houston. His main research interest is structural controls on sedimentary basins and their impact on petroleum systems. Luis Carlos became familiarized with the Caribbean region in 2008 when he works as a seismic interpreter in the Cayos Basin, Colombia Offshore for PGS. Additionally, right now he volunteers as principal researcher for a project in the Colombian Caribbean Offshore conducted by DIMAR, and he's also the author of different papers addressing the geological evolution of the Colombia Basin in the Caribbean. We want to acknowledge both Brian and Luis Carlos. We thank you for your participation in this offshore lecture series. Really, thank you very much for your time, willingness, and for sharing your knowledge with us, with all the geoscience community. So we're going to send you after this event, this certificate of appreciation for delivering this presentation to both Brian and Carlos. And with that, I'm just going to finish by inviting everyone to the next talk we're going to have from the offshore lecture series, which is going to be this overview of the Brazilian offshore exploratory history and its current situation, which is going to be done by Guilherme Arruda, which is the Information Management Coordinator at Repsol Sinopec Brazil. With that, we invite everyone to follow us on our different social media. Thanks everyone for being here at this special event, and thank you again, Brian and Luis Carlos. We're going to start with our presentation. So Brian, welcome.
Okay, thank you. The title of my talk today is second. There we go. The title of my talk today is Planning for Success in Colombia. Colombia was one of my last projects working at Anadarko. And it all started.
Brian, sorry to interrupt. We don't see your slides. Are you projecting?
I think so. Hold on a second. Do you see it now?
No.
Okay, just a second. Share screen, right?
And then I think you have to hit OK or something.
Okay. Share.
There we go.
How about, all right, very good. One more time. Slideshow. Can you see me now?
Looks great.
Oh, great. Sorry about that. Planning for Success in Colombia. This is a map that the USGS put out many years ago, showing onshore geology and offshore bathymetry and some of the major structural features that we're seeing. Colombia has had a long history of exploration, but almost all of it was onshore. And they also made a few major gas discoveries just at the shoreline in Balena. And pretty much there's not been an awful lot going on offshore. And beginning in 2007 with the ANH and the Rondas, people started to get interested in the offshore Colombia again. And that's what I want to talk about, is that what we saw that got us excited about getting involved in Colombia, and kind of what our pathway in history was. Okay. Here's a bathymetry topographic map of the region. Central America over here, Colombia over here. And the reason I wanted to show you this is that the main features are the Magdalena fan offshore, and there's no production in the area. So the thing we wanted to talk about is that, okay, if you've got the Magdalena fan, you're providing a reservoir and overburden to what could be a petroleum system, but what's the source rocks? There's no well penetrations here. And as an analog, if you go to the Niger Delta, if you don't believe the Akata shale story for the origin of the Niger Delta oils, you have the same problem there. You've got 10 billion barrels of oil have been found onshore in the tar seeps in Cretaceous age rocks. We've got billions and billions of barrels found in the Delta, high wax oils. But in the Delta itself, you don't find any source rocks. So I think it's kind of the same problem here in the Magdalena fan. We don't have any well control. We've only got a few DSDP penetrations. And we have outcrops. You have the Casona in onshore Colombia as a source rock. But one of the best source rocks I've ever seen occurs over here in Costa Rica on the Nicoya Peninsula. It's thick, several hundred feet thick. It's Cretaceous in age. By anyone's measurement, it's a world-class source rock. And it sits on top of pillow basalts or oceanic crust. So how do you get a world-class source rock and oceanic crust? I mean, it violates all the rules of thumbs we have about what are good source rock environments. Also, in the deep water, a DSDP well here was drilled in 3,900 meters of water, and it found some curious rocks, Cretaceous also, that were 1% to 2% TOC that were deposited in a reducing environment on top of basaltic basement. So there's something really unusual about this area where you can get potential source rocks deposited on what appears to be oceanic crust. We have the Gulf of Urabá here and the Sinu Fold Belt. And what I'm going to be talking about is the story about the Sinu Fold Belt. Okay. In 2007, Anadarko successfully acquired a big acreage position in Mozambique. So from the New Ventures Group point of view, what are we going to do now? We need to find the next big thing. So we created this thing called the Frontier Basin Screening Project. And the whole idea was to maintain an evergreen, consistent, and documented database on frontier basins. Our methodology was to take all the AAPG basins, and there's about 500 non-frontier versus 300 frontier ones. And conduct this process of people who couldn't have done it. Whoever's left is the person that did it. We used 6 criteria to screen those that didn't meet the strategic objectives. And we ended up with about 50 non-North American basins that warranted further evaluation. 50 basins seems like a lot, but frontier exploration, we've got a lot of time. And so as long as we kept this thing evergreen, as new information came in about basins around the world, new discoveries, new farm outs that people were offering, or new acreage or spec surveys that were being shot, we could go through and see, okay, this is what we know about these basins. Are we finding out something new, or is this a basin that we still have to wait? Our data sources were industry studies, databases, global GravMag, satellite images, spec seismic surveys, internal reports, experts, data rooms, government ministries, and academic publications. So Colombia was very interesting to us because you can see on this base map from the ANH, there's a lot of wells drilled onshore, a few wells drilled on the shelf. And at the time, in 2009, the only deep water well in in Colombia was the Araza 1 well, which is in 525 meters of water near the mouth of the Magdalena River. So this qualified as a frontier basin for us because there were oil and gas seeps or small oil and gas discoveries, but no real exploration had been done in the deep water area yet. What did Colombia offer? Colombia was a really unique place beginning in 2004 to 2007, and when we really started looking at these frontier basins, because the political environment improved, the operating environment improved, commercial terms the ANH were offering were getting better, and contract terms, they were acceptable. You had economic stability and a long history of contract sanctity, which is really important when you're investing billions of dollars before you get any production out and recover your costs. Probable petroleum system, there were seeps, slicks. You had greater than 3 kilometers of sediments offshore. The data was showing potential DHIs, and there were good analogs around the world for deposition in big deep water fans that you can use to substitute for a lack of data to determine what your petroleum probable petroleum system is. Also, you have to consider, is the expected product going to be monetizable, right? And Colombia had the infrastructure, had the markets, it had a sophisticated economy that understood oil production and gas production. Adequate geophysical and our well data available. The ANH put together a great database of all the seismic data that had been acquired in Colombia, wells, and also studies that they had conducted themselves about the potential petroleum system in the country. And was there a reasonable chance of materiality? It's really important when you're looking at frontier basins. You want room to run. You're taking an incredible risk when you're exploring for frontier basins. And if you're successful, you want to be sure that that risk you've taken leads you to other opportunities to justify the high risk you're taking on the first couple of wells. This page down. It took several years to understand what was known and what was assumed about the Magdalena Delta and fan petroleum system. We started this project in 2007. And we really were continuing to collect data to try to understand, what do people know and what do they assume about this petroleum system? The facts are the facts, but because there's so little data, there's an awful lot of assumptions that go into it about petroleum system, and how reasonable are they, or could you have an alternative working hypothesis? In 2011, Ecopetrol offered to farm down 2 deep water blocks in the Sinu Basin. This was a real break for us because now we got to really take a look at how did this deep water potential petroleum system work? Both blocks had recently acquired 2D data and 3D data. They showed large structures, evidence of reservoir, chemosynthetic communities at the seabed, and hydrocarbon indicators from piston cores. So here's where we start. You know, the Magdalena fan sits out here in ultra deep water, and its drainage area covers about 250,000 square kilometers. That's the purple area here, and also the blue area. This is the Kakawa River that's a tributary to the Magdalena. It's a huge river system, and it's spewing out about 7,000 cubic meters per second of sediments and water out in the Magdalena fan at the mouth here every day, or every second. I mean, it's a huge system. The Fuerte province, where the Sinu Basin farm out was, is this river system here. It's only a basin that covers about 15,000 square kilometers. And it's only flowing 383 meters cubed per second out into the Caribbean. And you're sitting there going, that's not a very big river system. It's only, what, less than 5% of what the Magdalena is spewing out. Yet we had a data set here, and the data set looked really interesting. We take a look at this provenance map. The question here then is that, did this used to be a much bigger river system? And I think that's possible. It's possible that the Kakawa River was joined with the Sinu River and was depositing this big depot system sitting here, creating shelf edge growth faults and deep water thrust. If you include the Kakawa, suddenly now the river system looks like a pretty impressive one, getting up to 4,000 cubic meters per second for flow. Okay, so what did we see? Here's where the 2D data was available. This thing is not really the 2D data from 2011 and earlier. It's actually all the seismic 2D present today. But this is where the 3D data sets were, up in the Fuerte Norte area and Fuerte Sur. In the Fuerte Norte area, there was several large fold structures. There was one really big box fold structure. It had a small cumulative at the water bottom, and it had good reservoir evidence on seismic data. The terms of the farm out was that we had to drill a well, and it's good to know that you've got a large four-way dip close structure to test. So there was another well commitment though down in the Fuerte Sur area, and that was more problematic. The 3D data down here showed multiple thruster four-way closures, but at the apex of all the structures, they had like what appeared to be a gas cloud, which you would interpret as being blown seals. On the seismic data, there was good evidence for reservoir, but these gas clouds made us really nervous about exploring down here. And you'll see on this data, almost all of it stops. All the 2D data stops at about 2,000 meters water depth. And this brings one of my pet peeves when exploring in frontier areas with data acquisition. Is you got to take some lines and shoot them in deep, ultra deep water, because you don't, when you're exploring, you don't know where the prize is. And oil is not where you want it to be. Oil is where you find it. And by quote unquote saving a little bit of money by not extending lines out to what some people would call goat pasture, you may avoid missing out on big opportunities, which I think is what happened here. You'll even see that the 3D surveys stopped at about 1,000 meters water depth. Well, when we looked at this data set, we saw some really interesting things. We think there's a Cretaceous source rock that's at the Colomont surface for these thrusts. We have a pre-kinematic section. The seismic data showed really good reservoir potential in. You had a synkinematic section that was being deposited at the same time that the thrusts were growing. And you also had a really thick post-kinematic section where the structures aren't growing at all. And it seems like the system is dead. We also saw, these are gas hydrates, where you can see where they're actually poking out at the surface. So you know you've got active fluid flow occurring on these structures. This made us a little bit nervous. But on some of the other lines we saw, once you got to the lead thrust in this play, in the footwall, we saw some really attractive looking potential direct hydrocarbon indicators that were stacked. And we thought, this is really interesting, because this is a play that really hasn't been tested out here. We've got what appear to be valid DHIs. Of course, you don't really know that until you drill them. But it was a play that made sense. This post-kinematic section thickness out here in the Sinu Delta is telling you the delta has been dead for quite a long time. Not been moving, not been active. And that's a real problem with petroleum systems, is once you stop adding to the isopac, in other words, increasing the temperature of the source rock, you're not generating anymore. So any oils that you have generated are suddenly becoming subject to biodegradation or the conversion from oil into methane. And there's been an awful lot of methane found on the shelf area of Colombia, just like you find in the shelf area of the Niger Delta. You get a lot of oil and gas fields on shore, an area that starts at the shelf or at the shoreline, it goes to the outer shelf that's a really gassy province. And then once you cross off the shelf edge going out into deep water, you begin to find oil fields again. So analogs make you kind of wonder what's going on or what the potential could be. So our work program that we conducted with Ecopatrol was to shoot a big 3D survey along this trend called the Purple Angel Survey. And what it showed was some really nice DHIs with fit to structure, good amplitude turnoffs at the places where you expect them to be, at the Purple Angel, at Gorgon. There was some other features out here in the TEA block Coal 5. And that block hadn't been turned into an E&P exploration block yet, so there weren't any wells starting to be drilled there, or we couldn't drill wells to convert the blocks. So what did we find out on this 3D survey? Well, we'll go back to our provenance area. We've got the Sinu Basin here that basically shut off during Pleistocene time and hasn't been deposited anything since. But when this shut off, you were also raising the coastal range of Colombia, and that started this Atracto Basin and San Juan Basin. And if you take a look at how much sediments are being deposited there, and the Atracto Basin covers about 38,000 square kilometers, it's putting out 5,000 cubic meters per second of fluids. There's a seven-headed mouth of a seven-headed dragon sitting at the mouth in the Atracto River here. It has 7 mouths. The sediment flow is almost as big as the Magdalena, and this tiny little drainage area. And the reason you get so much sediments and fluid flow is this is part of the rainiest part in the world because of all of the trade winds coming off the Pacific and hitting the mountains here, resulting in a huge outflow of sediments and water through this mouth, dumping down in the Gulf of Urabá into creating this huge fan deposit out here that I'm calling the Atracto fan. And you also have the San Juan Basin here. It's an even smaller basin, only 15,000 square kilometers. It's dumping out 2,200 cubic meters per second of sediments. So this got us, how does the system work? How does this petroleum system work? Well, this one is not growing anymore, but the Atracto is growing like gangbusters, and it's only been happening in Pleistocene to present day time. And if you look in detail, you can see where all of the breached thrust in the Forte Sur area were back here, but right on trend at the leading edge of this is where the Cronus Purple Angel discovery was made. The Gorgon discovery was made. No one's talked about this, but at the end of that 3D survey was a play called the Kraken play, which is probably even bigger than Purple Angel and Gorgon. But Anadarko didn't listen to me either, and the 3D data actually covers this side of that structure, but you can see the amplitudes on and the roll on this part of the structure. This is called the Cano Norte structure. You can see it's 2 different thrust belts coming at different angles are influencing each other. You have the thrust oriented like this in the Sinu, and you've got thrust now oriented this way in the Atracto. This one's blown, but there's also appears to be some stratigraphic potential that you shale out as you're moving to where the structure's blown, and some nice amplitudes there. And then you can see what might be incipient thrusts are also creating the four-way dip closures, if you will, for the Kronos and perhaps another play that sits here down dip from Gorgon. So by stepping outside the local area and then zooming down into the local area, we were able to concentrate our exploration program on what's turned out to be a really attractive area. Now, we were expecting to find oil. We only found very dry gas. We tried drilling deeper, perhaps to warmer rocks that may not have been had their hydrocarbons biodegraded into methane. But we started to hit overpressures as the deeper we went. This goes back to the question I mentioned earlier about analogs. A lot of experience at Anadarko has to do with the Gulf of Mexico, but it's not really a good analog for the kind of fans you find in Colombia, because the Gulf of Mexico is mostly quartz arenite. It's very long distance travel for the sand grains. You get good weathering of them. All of the lithic fragments are eroded out, turned into clays. And so basically in the deep water, you find sands, very clean quartz-rich sands and clays. Maybe an occasional volcanic ash and detrital carbonates, but that's not really all that aerially present. Okay, Colombia has a lot of lithic fragments in the sediments. Those lithic fragments, when you start to heat them up, they start to break down early and release clay. That clay gets stuck in the pore throats. And I think that's the origin of the overpressure in the wells that we saw at Kalamazoo and at Kronos and Purple Angel as you try drilling deeper. So the good news is that means that any oil or hydrocarbons being generated with source rock present day is not going to be diluted by filling the deeper pore space. It's going to follow faults into the shallow pore space where pore throats haven't been clogged yet, and you'll still get good permeability and also have good porosity because it's not deeply buried. It's a lot of assumptions, a lot of thought games, but I think that's kind of what's going on in this portion of the Delta. And I'm going to stop now and turn it over to Luis. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, right? Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Let me share the screen. Can you hear me, Emily?
Carlos, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Oh, we're looking at your screen right now.
We can listen to you, Juan Pablo, but we can continue with Luis, please.
All right. So can you hear me, Juan Pablo?
We can hear you, Luis.
All right, perfect. So let me, first of all, choose the laser pointer. All right. So hi, everyone. Thanks to the AAPG student chapters of Argentina and Colombia for having invited me to this session and for your assistance to this event. Today, I would like to talk about the understanding of the origin of the DHIs in the Colombian Basin. This is a work done with Lucia Torrado. The views and opinions in these presentations are of AGI exploration and the authors, and doesn't reflect any views from Woodside Energy or another companies. So the agenda that I will cover today includes an update of the current exploration status of the Colombian Basin. I will summarize a proposed Cretaceous system that is taking place in the Colombian Basin, and later on I will show the relationship of the basement and the deposition of the potential source rocks in the Colombian Basin. I will continue the presentation with some DHI examples, the Cretaceous rock, some Cretaceous rock samples that are around of the Caribbean region, and I will wrap up the presentation with some basin modeling over the Colombian Basin and some final remarks. So this year has been a quite active year for the exploration of the Colombian offshore in the drilling and drilling 2 wells in the Colombian offshore. The first one was the Ushua-1 well that was drilled in April. It was drilled by Petroboras in the Tayrona Basin. It tested a Miocene turbidite system that pinched out against a continental rotated block. The Tayrona Basin has been heavily explored, showing a gas potential. However, our proposal is to evaluate the untested Cretaceous play that is along of this sweet spot strip that I'm showing right now. This strip contains potential Cretaceous rocks and charged structural traps. So in June of this year, Gorgon 2 well was drilled, testing the continuation of a gas discovery reported in 2016 by Gorgon 1 well. This the drilling results hasn't been reported yet, but estimates of the pre-drilling volumes shows a potential of 10 TCFs for the structure. This well reached a reported flat spot, as you see here in this area, and it was sidetracked twice. So some questions that remains open for the operator and they haven't released yet is, first of all, what type of contact they found at this well, and secondly, what was the content fluid that they found in the region. Finally, Cumbia 1 well is a well that will be tested over the sweet spot for the Cretaceous rocks and the structural traps offshore Colombia. This well was planned to be drilled in 2020, but it was delayed due to the Chevron Noble Energy transaction. This well will be exploited over the Cretaceous rocks, as I mentioned, and this is the first time that a well will be drilled in the core area where we have the deepest part of the Colombian Basin, where we have our potential source rocks under the onset of oil migration, onset of oil generation. So let's move on the first part of the presentation. First of all, in 2020, we published this paper in the Marine and Petroleum Geology, proposing a late Cretaceous Pliocene petroleum system in the Colombian Basin. This system contains Cretaceous source rocks of late Cretaceous in age and Miocene to Pliocene source rocks, reservoir rocks that are being filled within the Colombian Basin. Our model suggests that there is an expulsion around early Miocene times, and today there is an expulsion, current expulsion of this system. If we go into the details, we use the DSDP wells. We visited the core repository. We run some analysis over geochemical analysis over these samples in Weatherford laboratories. We obtained some pyrolysis regarding to these Cretaceous units, and later on we were able to correlate this information to the deepest part of the seismic sections that we observed here in this part. So we were able to identify Cretaceous intervals, rich organic intervals in this area that are wedging into the deepest part of the Colombian Basin. Based on our results, we observed that vast areas of the Colombian Basin are under the onset of oil generation, first of all. Secondly, we expect to have a vertical migration everywhere over the areas where we have the onset of oil generation, and a lateral vertical migration, especially in areas where we have the accretion prism. The main reason is because this detachment level is a shaly detachment level where we have overpressure shale intervals that allow the migration to up this migration over these areas where we have three-way structures and four-way structures that can be charged by this migration of these hydrocarbons. Later on, these hydrocarbons are filling some structure, stratigraphic traps within the Colombian Basin, in the deepest part of the Colombian Basin. And due to the low temperatures for the shallowest intervals, we observe some biodegradation of these shallowest pools of hydrocarbons. In some of the sections, we observe some biodegradation and release of this gas as a dry gas over the region. And this dry gas migrates up deep where we have this frontal migration of the accretion prism. One of the possibilities that we have for Gorgon 1 well is that Gorgon 1 well tested this type of structures. However, Gorgon 2, it can be another example where we go into the deepest part, and it could have tested some thermogenic signatures in the deepest part. So that is something that we are waiting for some news in the region. So in this presentation, we are proposing this sweet spot for the Cretaceous source rock, where we have the accumulation of potential migration over this area in front of these 3-way and 4-way structures. So what is the basement configuration, and what is the relationship between the basement configuration and the position of the potential source rocks in the Colombian Basin? So this is a gravity filter that shows the heterogeneity of the Colombian Basin along of the Western Caribbean Sea. You will see that there are different patterns in the gravity in overall. In the literature, there is a well-reported event called the CLIP, or the Caribbean Large Igneous Province, that marks with some basalt flows over the region. This CLIP is present in certain areas. Yes, we agree with that information, but also we identified that there are some areas where you don't have this CLIP over original oceanic crust, or present areas where you will have original oceanic crust. Therefore, there are areas where you can have potential deposition of Cretaceous source rocks over these windows of pre-volcanism. In the 1990s, Ghosh at the University of Houston identified some magnetic strips, in this case west-east magnetic lineaments for the Colombian Basin, and in the Venezuelan Basin some northwest is a southeast magnetic signature associated to the magnetic basement for the Venezuela Basin. According to Ghosh, these signatures are around, magnetic signatures are around late Jurassic for the Venezuela Basin to early Cretaceous for the Colombian Basin. Recent studies and the acquisition of Anadarko's 3D, the Emerald 3D block, 3D over the Colombian Basin, and with the work with the Anadarko team and Brian Frost and TJ Waller in 2016, they observed some similarities with the reported magnetic stripping in the Colombian Basin. In this case, they reported a parallel ridges that are taking place, mimicking basically this type of magnetic signatures. If we are able to bring one seismic sections over this part, you will see these ridges control the position of potential Cretaceous system. This is the system that we are proposing as a potential source rock, and you will see in the next slides how this source rock can be measured and some evidence of the release of some hydrocarbons coming from this interval. So last week I was in the image conference and I assisted to one of the presentations done by Woodmack, and they mentioned that there is a 60 to 65% of successful wells in frontier basin that are DHI supported. In the case of the Colombian Basin, there are several locations showing direct hydrocarbon indicators. In this case, it's a key element to risk the exploration for this margin. In this case, I'm showing line AA prime in the top and the bottom part, the line BB prime, showing our potential Cretaceous intervals that are emanating gas from these potential source rocks to the shallowest interval. These emanations reach and accumulate Miocene to Pliocene intervals, our reservoirs for the Colombian Basin. Some of these accumulations within the Miocene Pliocene intervals represents polarity reversals, bright spots, and class 2, 3 ADOs are also identified within these areas. However, although we are not recommending this in this presentation, the stratigraphic trap, there is a huge potential for the stratigraphic play into the Colombian Basin, especially in areas where we don't have the deformation associated with accretion and So for the DHIs, we also observe double flat spots in certain areas that are filling some three-way structures or four-way structures. In this case, line FF prime shows, first of all, a fault that is connecting the deepest intervals of the Colombian Basin to shallowest intervals. This fault shares some shallowest structures with gas and oil in this case. We observe some flat spots, as I mentioned in this part, double flat spots in certain structures, like in line G prime that is shown in this part. This structure is affected by a BSR, a regional BSR that we observe in the region, but also we observe some flat spots associated to deepest intervals, like this flat spot that is below that BSR, and as well as this flat spot. They differ from the paleo BSR, first of all, due to the high heat flow or that makes unstable the gas rates at this depth. So we are quite comfortable to say that they are not a paleo BSR for these deepest structures. And this is just one example of several ones that are being identified within these structures in the Colombian Basin. Although the Colombian Basin has reported several locations of BSRs, like in this contour, within this contour, it doesn't mean that the whole region is produce a biogenic system. There are several piston cores from ANH, recent piston cores, and piston cores done by the Texaco and other companies in the Tayrona Basin and the Colombian offshore that show some mix of biogenic and thermogenic acids. So moving into a regional context and a regional view, and putting into context the Colombian Basin with the neighborhood area, we see that the Colombian Basin is surrounded, first of all, by several areas that has reported, first of all, Cretaceous rocks with high TOCs that in certain cases are immature, okay, but in certain areas they show some maturity with high TOCs, like the low mature microformation, with high potential indexes, like a low mature microformation with 800 of hydrogen index in overall, or in the DSDP wells that we identify running the rock level analysis, we identify TOCs from 2% up to 11% in overall, and iron is the sediment dump that we have here. We have a major river, as Brian mentioned. This river has been active since Miocene times, dumping a lot of sediment. And this is important because it's adding, first of all, a key element that is our our reservoir system, our reservoir in general, and secondly, is adding temperature into the system, something that we don't have in the Venezuelan basin. We have the samples retrieved by the ODP, the DSDP wells, but we don't have that maturity over these wells. In this case, in the Colombian Basin, due to the Magdalena fan and all these sediments, we have all this maturity within the Colombian Basin. But in overall, the final message is that we have the Colombian Basin surrounded by these high prolific substrata of Cretaceous age. So moving on the basin modeling of the Colombian Basin, this is a summary of the models. A detailed work is said in the paper that we published in 2020, and this is just a summary of the mid-case scenario for the pseudo-maturity map of the Colombian salt rocks. So you will see that the majority of vast areas of the Colombian Basin in these mid-case scenarios are affected by the thermal maturation of this oceanic salt rock. Secondly, we are proposing again this sweet spot strip where we have the combination of the structural traps that are the last frontal deformation part in the Colombian Basin, plus the maturity of potential salt rocks within the Colombian Basin. And another important point is the piston core studies. There are several piston core studies along of this region that shows a C2 plus component present in the region. So the only thing is test and drill wells over this region to find some oil into the region. So like a final remark that I want to bring here, and I leave some comments, is first of all, the cliff left pristine areas, windows of pre-volcanism. These three areas are represented by this type of ridges areas that are being filled by these troughs, and these troughs are being filled by potential Cretaceous rocks that are emanating some gas to the shallowest levels. The shales are present along of the Colombian Basin, and they are not only present in these four-way structures, three-way structures, but also in the stratigraphic traps along of the Colombian Basin. Today, the Colombian Basin or the Colombian offshore is categorized as a gas-prone basin, but testing new places like the sweet spot for cretaceous rocks and that is presented here will unlock the Colombia Basin as an oil-prone basin. So this is the first well that reached almost a little bit further in that part. Cumbia well will have some participation in that part, drilling a little bit the further part, but we will wait some news from Chevron and Occidental and the Semi-Ecopetrol to explore this further part that is a new play, untested play for the Colombian Basin. And right now, this region has something that the world needs is gas. This gas today is considered as an advantage gas with an upside of finding liquid hydrocarbons in the deepest part of the Colombian Basin. So having said that, I will leave you, first of all, saying thank you, and I will leave you with some emails, 2 emails that you can contact us and Lucia if you wanna hear something, a more detailed work regarding to this study. You can contact Lucia, and she has a more extended version of this presentation. So having said that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions for me or for Brian, we are open to discuss it. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me?
Really low.
Can you hear me now? Better?
No, no. A little bit.
Thank you very much, Luis and Brian.
Yeah.
I think that Juan Pablo had problems with his computer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we will start with the cycle of questions. We invite those present to request they can ask by activating their microphone or writing in the chat. We have a question from Carlos Giraldo. He says, hello, thanks for your presentations. And the question is there any direct evidence different from DSTP and OITP wells that confirms the distribution of Cretaceous source probe throughout the Colombia Basin? Maybe for Luis or Brian.
Brian, go ahead, first of all.
It's a question of sampling. The DSTP wells, most of them were, by definition, they're all drilled open hole wells. So in their charter, they weren't allowed to drill any DSTPs where there might be the
I think that's the Brian is prison, maybe.
Right.
Luis.
Yeah. So let me go ahead. First of all, so direct
basement.
Okay. Brian, can you repeat the last?
I'm
10
sorry.
seconds?
The DSTP's wells were not allowed to drill close to any petroleum provinces. So your sampling is done in places where they're not going to find anything. In DSTP 153, they drilled the oceanic plateau and they happened to find some thin source rocks on top of the plateau. So the question is those thin source rocks in the top of the plateau indicate thick source rocks down in the basin, where that section you can see expands on the seismic data and has very interesting seismic properties. The trouble with seismic, though, unless you have a well to normalize it, you can only say they're potential anomalies, but you can't actually tell what they are. we do have outcrops of excellent source rocks in that in Costa Rica and in Colombia, but that doesn't really help you as to what happens underneath the basin. We don't have any data. But having a lack of data doesn't mean that you have a lack of hydrocarbons, because we have lots of DHIs that are very convincing potential DHIs. They're just waiting for a well to drill. And then after that, if you drill a successful well, it'll be a moot point and no one will care. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and for my side, we don't have direct like a well confirmation of a Cretaceous system within the Colombia Basin because of the comments that Brian just mentioned. But we have a really good coverage around of the Caribbean region that shows a Cretaceous sediments at least over these neighborhood areas like in Costa Rica, in Jamaica, Colombia, onshore areas, and in the BSCP areas, in the Beata Ridge. So although we don't have the information in the central part of the Colombian Basin, we have a good information around the areas that implies that we also have the same system in the middle part of the Colombian Basin.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about my issues with my microphone, and thank you, Juan, for helping. So thank you, Luis Carlos and Brian. We're gonna move ahead with the next questions. We have Diego Iafa. He has first some comments, very nice presentations. He says there's no need to only consider the Cretaceous condensated sediments over the cold Caribbean oceanic crust as the main or only source rock. It's interesting the possibility of multiple biogenic systems. There's still debate on the heat flow model for the Caribbean. And one question here, it's overburden and dynamic subduction trench mechanic subsidence the main thermal source?
Brian, do you want to go ahead first of all?
My personal opinion, it's just purely overburden. I mean, the delta gets up, the fan thickness gets up to 10, 12 kilometers, which even at low heat flow is sufficient to mature hydrocarbons through the gas window. So what was really curious to me was that if you looked at the isopack on top of what Luis is projecting as the source rocks, that all of the present day DHI anomalies are all occurring just where that source rock would go into the oil window. And that as you go further away from the shore to thinner and thinner sediments, then the DHI stop. So to me, that's indirect evidence that it's a sufficient overburden is present to generate the hydrocarbons where we're seeing the potential DHIs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with Brian regarding to the heat flow. The main component for the heat flow is the overburden. There are recent examples by the discoveries in Namibia. Those discoveries were done over oceanic crust, and the oceanic crust is completely cold, but the overburden is the main factor for the thermal maturation in that part. In this case, there is no subduction trench in the Colombian Basin per se. There is a low subduction, yes, but that subduction is going to be further in onshore Colombia in overall. And for the potential multiple biogenic systems, yes, you can have some potential biogenic systems for shallower intervals, like the Miocene. The Miocene can be an interval that can have some biogenic contribution. As you see, the Magdalena fan has a lot of sediment dump, terrestrial sediment dump into the Colombian Basin, and in that part you may have this biogenic system that is contributing a lot. And actually there is one figure that I show with this gas cloud regarding to this type of biogenic system that is the Miocene. But the word that we are proposing here is a different system. It's the Cretaceous system that is showing something with the DHIs. Yes, and that is something that we need to explain, and that is something that has been explained with this work. And the only thing is test wells and show some information regarding with that. Another thing that we need to understand is that there is a thermogenic signature in the region with all these piston core data. Small signatures, but there are signatures. So we need to explain where it's coming from these signatures. And that is the aim of the paper and the aim of the exploration of where this sweet spot strip that we are proposing.
Okay, thank you. We have here one question from Maria Maninat. It's a question to Luis Carlos regarding the migration. How do you explain the remobilization of hydrocarbon? And also, have you done any modeling to know that you have expelled enough hydrocarbons to follow all the path of migration?
Excellent question, Maria Carolina. First of all, remobilization is due to, first of all, in our model, due to biodegradation of shallower intervals. So we have shallower intervals that are affected by low temperatures, and that low temperatures can contribute to the remobilization of hydrocarbons as a biogenic gas to shallower intervals. So that is the main reason that we observe some remobilization of the hydrocarbons. However, if you go to the deepest part, you can have just the normal pool of liquids. And if we have a modeling regarding to the total expel of the hydrocarbons in the Colombian Basin, yes, in the paper there is a number that we put. It's around 1.3 trillion barrels of oil that has been exposed, or hydrocarbons that has been exposed within this margin. This 1.3 is because we reduce the whole area to the ridges within the Colombian Basin. So this is just constrained to the ridges of the Colombian Basin. So 1.3.2 trillion barrels in overall for the system. So just 10% or less than 10% that has been accumulated over the shallowest parts is enough to have a billion barrel field in the Colombian Basin. Yeah, and actually the Chevron's Cumbia well proposes a 500 million barrel accumulation just for that prospect that is in the nearby areas of the accretionary prism. I don't know if Brian has some comments. Have you calculated this total expulsion for the whole basin?
Yes, we took the hydrocarbon expulsion calculations that were done by a geologist with Amoco based on the source rocks that were found in the Nicoya Peninsula. And we did a volumetric assessment of what we thought was the volume of what we were calling the potential Cretaceous source rocks underneath the Magdalena fan. And that volume of rock and an expulsion efficiency that was calculated was 4,000 barrels of oil per acre foot. And that number came to be about 3.
We lost him in the best part. Yeah, in the best part.
Let's wait 1 second.
Experience looking at deltas, I have never seen a place that had so many DHIs in aerial extent and in thickness as the Grand Columbia Basin. It's worldwide, it's a unique area. And it's just waiting for some wells to be drilled. Retirement as to see.
Brian, can you repeat the number? We lost the connection when
what happens.
Brian, can you repeat the number?
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Hello.
Connection when you were saying the number. Connection when you say the number 3.
The number that we calculated was about 4 trillion barrels.
4 trillion barrels for the whole Colombian Basin. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's consistent with all the DHIs. There's a huge volume of DHI out in that deep water area. that's unique in any delta that I've seen in the world. And I think it bodes very favorably for the country of Colombia. And I just can't wait to see what the drilling results we'll see. It has a very promising future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brian and Luis Carlos. We have here one question from Victor Ramirez. We're gonna take just 5 more minutes. And Victor says, there are models claiming normal or thin crust in the Caribbean. What are the implications of either model on thermal and maturity of the petroleum systems?
Let me go ahead. With that question. So there are models claiming normal or thin oceanic crust in the Caribbean. So the normal oceanic crust that we observe in the Colombian Basin are around 8 kilometers. Normal oceanic crust in certain areas. The pristine areas where we call free of volcanism, free of the large igneous province. But there are some areas that are affected by all these sediment dumps that stretch a little bit that oceanic crust and can be stretched up to 5 kilometers in certain areas, or there are some hyperextended areas where you can have up to 3 kilometers, but in those areas you can have some separationization. So what are the implications? Temperature. Somebody mentioned that it's a cold oceanic crust. If you stretch a little bit the oceanic crust in that part, it will add more temperature into the system, and that is better for our source rock. Our source rock is going to be warm enough to generate some hydrocarbons, and our model shows that having a really cold oceanic crust, the overburden is enough to generate some hydrocarbons, and that is the reason that you have all these DHIs over the Colombian Basin.
Okay, Luis Carlos, thank you. There's one question here from Stephen Wood. He says, for thanks and great talks. And his question is, so we see largely a gas-dominated system, but do the gas isotopes from existing discoveries support or hint at the presence of a thermogenic petroleum system?
Brian.
I'm not a geochemist, so I'm not going to speak about the gas isotopes. All I can say is that my analog is a Niger Delta. Is that when exploration started onshore back in the 50s, and they were quite successful, and they continue to discover oil and gas fields offshore, beginning at the coastline, but they kept finding more and more gas fields as they went out to the shelf edge. And because of that,
I think we lost Brian.
Yeah. So let me answer, Stephen. So there are like a piston cores that shows a really clear evidence of this thermogenic system in the Colombian Basin. Actually, ANH with Fulbro, they did a piston core studies like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, over the whole Colombian Basin, and those show some evidence of thermogenic signatures. Chuchupa Ballena or the same Gorgon wells or some of these wells, they show a high content of biogenic gas, yes, but there are some signatures showing some thermogenic features like isotopes. So there is the thermogenic presence in the Colombian Basin. The only thing is you need to find where is that thermogenic signature and where it's accumulated. And I will like mention something that a Marshmallow mentioned, like in the image conference about Namibia and the conjugate of the region, especially Campos Santos Basin. Santos Basin was considered as a gas-prone basin. It was drilled they drilled 150 wells around the area, and all these wells were found gas, and just gas. One idea came, they drilled deeper into the pre-salt, and they found oil. Right now, that gas-prone basin is no longer a gas-prone basin. I think the Colombian Basin, we have just two wells that reach this sweet spot area, and we need to drill more wells to at least to test the region, because we don't have exploration. So if we want to have some testing our own acreage, we need to go deeper and test all these places, not assuming that the region is a gas-prone basin and that's it. We need to go deeper, and deeper means go to that strip of the sweet spot and test all these structures that are DHI supported.
Okay, Luis Carlos. Brian, if you want to finish your answer, we heard you until you were talking about the gas fields that were found on the shelf, moving up to the shelf. We cannot hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. The real problem with exploration is that you're trying to put together a petroleum system, but you never have all the pieces. You never have the data that you need in order to establish the certainty that science requires. You can make hypotheses, you can have alternative working assumptions, but you can never prove to people's satisfaction because you don't have the missing piece. And in some basins, you'll never have the missing piece because you will never be drilled deep enough to be able to prove or disprove that hypothesis. And in frontier exploration, that's the problem you fall into all the time. And in my experience in 40 years, if a company doesn't want to do something, any excuse is a good excuse because you didn't want to do anything anyway. But if you truly want to find hydrocarbons, petroleum, then multiple working hypothesis is what we do. We look at the available data, we try to see how the system works, and then we state a hypothesis. And then we look for facts that check it. The ultimate fact is a well is drilled and you find something. But other than that, you can keep going around and around in arguments and get nowhere. And I think that's why there are still things left to be found. And the good part is that, you know, if you don't find it, then that leaves something for somebody else to find later.
Okay, I think we lost Brian again. But so we're gonna move on while we have Brian back. So just to finish, we have some different comments on our Q&A box from Diego Iafa. Oh yeah. Brian, can you hear us? Can you hear us? We cannot hear you.
Petroleum exploration is an art, it's not a science. And we use science because the facts are important to us, but we have to fill in the parts that we don't have the data with the art. And that's what makes us a fun job.
Okay. Brian, Luis Carlos, so we have some other comments on the Q&A from Daniel, from Diego, where they recommend some papers and where they make some comments. We have to finish now because of time. We're just gonna give 1 minute to each of you just to give a final comment for everyone who is still here at the event. And with that, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you very much. So if we can start with Luis Carlos, please.
Yes, so first of all, I would like to say thank you again to the AAPG student chapters of Argentina, Colombia, for having this place and share all these ideas that we have right now. This is the current status of the Colombian Basin, a basin that shows a huge potential, not only for gas, but also for oil that needs to be tested. And we are on the time, and everything is pointing to those areas will be tested coming soon by the companies that we have in Colombia. So we are in a good shape, and it's just question of time, and let's see the results. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to say to the young professionals at the AAPG, thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about something that I love to do. And I'm always reminded by this expression or saying that when you find something good, you share it. That way the good spreads. And that's what I'd like to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, Brian, Luis Carlos, and thanks to all the people who attended this event. For all people who have any remaining questions, remember you can contact directly Brian or Luis Carlos and also Lucia. And with that, we are going to finish with this. Remember, our next event is going to be about offshore exploration in Brazil. We hope to see you there, and thank you very much for this space. We hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.